Something brought you here, but it wasn't luck, it was a calling. What if I told you that nothing you believe about yourself is completely real? That your identity, your fears, your certainties were built on a fragile foundation that could collapse at any moment? But what if that's exactly what needs to happen? True knowledge doesn't comfort. It destroys. It breaks down everything that was placed inside you until only the truth remains. And alchemy has always been about that. It was never just some esoteric practice. It's a code, a process that transforms lead into gold, but not in the way you were led to believe. The lead is you, loaded with beliefs, pain, and illusions, and the gold, your true essence, waiting to emerge. But before that, something needs to die, and here's the truth no one tells you. Not everyone can handle this process. Not everyone crosses the portal, because crossing means leaving behind everything that is false, and you can feel it, can't you? That restlessness, that sense that something inside you no longer fits into the world around you. That's not a mistake. That's the beginning of transformation. So the only question left is, are you ready to cross? The truth has always been here, but not for everyone. It was fragmented, hidden, buried under symbols and metaphors that only the initiated could decipher. It was too dangerous to be in the wrong hands, because alchemy was never just about metals, formulas, or laboratories. It was always about power, the power to transform yourself, the power to awaken, and that's why they tried to erase it. In ancient Egypt, it was a secret of the priests, guarded in temples as sacred knowledge. They knew that nature didn't just exist, it taught. The cycle of death and rebirth wasn't just physical. It was spiritual too. It was the map to the immortality of the soul. They didn't speak about it openly. They encoded it. They hid the secrets in myths, in pyramids, in hieroglyphs. And those who knew how to read understood. Then the Greeks arrived. They took these teachings and gave them a new name, Alchemia. They incorporated Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle. But the real leap came with Hermes Trismegistus. He didn't just bring knowledge. He brought a code, and within that code was a fundamental principle. As above, so below. As within, so without. Read that again. That's the secret that would change everything, because it means that what happens in the outer world happens inside you. That every chemical transformation, every physical reaction is a reflection of something greater. The ancient alchemists knew this. They studied fire not just to heat metals, but to understand the purification of the soul. They dissolved substances because they knew they also had to dissolve the ego. Transmutation was never just about gold. It was always about awakening, but knowledge was hunted. In the Arab world, alchemists kept the flame alive while Europe sank into darkness. Jabir ibn Hayyan, one of the greatest masters of alchemy, wrote hundreds of texts on chemical processes, but between the lines, there was something much bigger. He spoke of the transformation of the human being. He spoke of the path to true enlightenment, and when this wisdom reached medieval Europe, the response was swift. Bonfires, torture, silence. The Inquisition went after anyone who dared to question the official narrative. So the alchemists had to be smart. They created symbols, they created metaphors. They hid the truth in drawings of dragons devouring their own tails, in kings being dissolved in fire, in moons and suns dancing in the sky. Because if the message was clear, it would be destroyed. But if it was a riddle, only those who were ready could decipher it. And so, alchemy survived. But then modern science came along and tried to reduce it. They said it was just proto-chemistry, a primitive stage of science. They said alchemists were just bad scientists trying to discover chemistry, but they didn't get it. Because modern science looks outward. Alchemy has always looked inward. And that's the real difference. Chemistry transforms elements. Alchemy transforms consciousness. Because it was always about that. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're already starting to realize it. But what were these ancient masters really saying? They looked at the elements, at the cycles of nature, and saw a reflection of something much greater. Rain would fall, seep into the earth, dissolve, and then evaporate, returning to the sky. The same thing happened with consciousness. The same thing happened with the spirit. The universe wasn't meaningless chaos, it was a mirror. Everything that exists outside also exists within. Alchemists didn't believe in the separation between matter and spirit. To them, what happened in the physical world was just the manifestation of a deeper principle. When they burned a metal, when they dissolved a substance, they weren't just observing chemical reactions. They were studying the soul itself, but over time, the world forgot. The advancement of science brought explanations about the elements, the reactions, the composition of the universe. But at the same time, something was lost. The connection between matter and consciousness was broken. The modern world separated what was once one: theory and practice, mind and matter, reason and spirituality, and that was the greatest mistake, because the ancients always knew what Carl Sagan rediscovered centuries later. We are made of the same stardust, the iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, the carbon in our skin. All of it was forged in the burning hearts of stars that exploded billions of years ago. Everything that exists in us also exists in the cosmos, but most people go through life without realizing this. We live trapped in the illusion of separation. We believe we are isolated from the world, that our thoughts are just abstract things inside our minds. But the ancient alchemists knew the truth. What you see around you is a reflection of what's inside you. And that's why true alchemy starts from the inside out. Transforming metals was just an allegory. The real work was the transmutation of consciousness. The lead of ignorance had to be burned, dissolved, purified, until only the gold of knowledge remained. But this required more than just study. It required living the transformation, because knowledge means nothing if it isn't applied. And that is the problem with the modern world. Today, people read, study, watch, consume knowledge, but they don't apply it. They know the theory, but they don't live the practice. They seek answers, but they don't transform. And without transformation, there is no alchemy. A true alchemist isn't the one who understands the processes. It's the one who becomes the process. He doesn't just talk about evolution. He evolves. He doesn't just understand how the mind works. He dissolves its limitations. He doesn't just comprehend that the external world reflects the internal. He shapes his reality from within. And maybe that's why you're here. Because in some way, your consciousness has already realized it, and now the transformation has begun. Nigredo, the first great portal of transformation. But before transmutation comes dissolution. Before gold, the lead has to be broken down, reduced to its rawest essence. This is the first portal of alchemy. The moment when everything you thought you were begins to crumble. The ancients called this phase Nigredo. The dark night of the soul, the collapse of the old identity, the void where the real process begins. And that void is terrifying, because it means facing what has always been hidden. It means looking inward and seeing what you've spent a lifetime trying to avoid. No more masks, no more distractions, no more excuses. All that's left is you, standing before your own shadow. Nigredo is the breaking point. In myths and fairy tales, it's that moment when the hero loses everything, when they're thrown into the unknown, betrayed, abandoned, trapped in a cave with no way out. The moment they realize the road back has been destroyed, and the only option left is to move forward, even without knowing what awaits. It's a baptism by chaos. Alchemists saw this phase as putrefaction. Just like a seed has to rot to release the life inside it, a person must allow everything inauthentic to fall apart. Old beliefs, destructive patterns, fears, illusions. Everything has to die before something new can be born. And that death hurts. It hurts when you realize that the relationship you held onto so tightly wasn't love, but attachment. It hurts when you see that the job draining you never brought fulfillment, just an illusion of security. It hurts when you understand that the dreams you chased weren't really yours, but expectations placed on you. The ego doesn't want to be destroyed. It resists. It makes excuses. It clings to the familiar because the unknown is scary. So you try to avoid it. You keep yourself busy. You drown in distractions, social media, overwork, fleeting pleasures, anything to avoid looking within. But there's no escape. Sooner or later, Nigredo arrives, And the more you resist, the harder it gets. Life forces you to face this darkness one way or another. Sometimes it's a breakup. Sometimes it's a financial crisis. Sometimes it's loss. Something happens, and suddenly everything you believed in collapses. And in that moment you understand. You can't keep going the same way. But this isn't punishment. It's a portal. Nigredo doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to strip away everything that no longer serves you, to force you to let go of what was never truly yours, to show you that the pain of change is always less than the pain of staying stuck. And the sooner you understand this, the easier it becomes to move through it. Because only those who walk through the fire without running away find true transformation. Lead must burn before it can become gold. And maybe you're already feeling that fire. But not everyone makes it through. Many stand at the edge of the abyss, unable to let go of the weight they carry. Because that weight, the lead that alchemists spoke of, isn't just a symbol. It's real. It's in the way you were taught to see the world, in the beliefs that were placed in you before you ever had the chance to question them. From an early age, you were told who you should be. You were told to follow the safe path, that certain things were impossible, that people like you don't get to have certain things, that happiness comes only after struggle, that money is dirty, that love is pain, that dreams are foolish, and you believed it. After all, everyone around you repeated these truths like laws. You grew up carrying that lead without even realizing it, until one day it became too heavy. And so life pushes you into Nigredo. The old self must die, but how? How do you let go of a weight that has been with you for so long? It feels like part of your own body. This story speaks deeply to that truth. In a remote village, there was a young man named Elias. Since childhood, he had been taught that his fate was already decided. His parents were farmers, his grandparents were farmers, and he was meant to be one too. There was no other option. The land is what keeps us alive, they said. Don't dream too big, accept your fate. But Elias felt something different inside him. At night, he would look at the distant mountains and wonder what lay beyond them. Something inside him burned to explore, but fear held him back. And so he grew up, repeating the life he had been told to live. Until one day, a traveler arrived in the village. He spoke of distant lands, cities that shone like gold, paths that led to places Elias could never have imagined. The young man's heart raced. He knew he had to leave. But when he announced his decision, he was met with disapproving looks. "You're abandoning us," his parents asked. "You're ungrateful," his friends said. "What if you fail? What if you get lost? What if you never come back?" Elias hesitated. Fear crept back in. He almost gave up. But that night, he had a dream. In the dream, he was carrying a bag full of heavy stones. He walked along the road toward the mountains, but the farther he went, the heavier the stones became. His steps slowed, his knees buckled, he collapsed. The weight was too much to continue. Then a voice whispered, "Let go." He looked at the bag, but he was afraid. These stones had been with him forever. They were part of him. What if he needed them later? What if, by letting them go, he realized he was nothing without them? The voice repeated, "Let go," and Elias, with trembling hands, opened the bag. The stones fell one by one onto the ground. The weight disappeared. He stood up, took a deep breath, and ran. For the first time, he felt light. For the first time, he was free. When he woke up, he knew what he had to do. The next morning, he left, and he never looked back. The truth of this story is simple. The weight you carry may not be yours, but until you let it go, you will never go beyond what you were told was possible. The death of the old self is not some distant metaphor. It's a real process. And yes, it's painful, because it means letting go of everything that was comfortable, even if it was painful too. It means accepting that you don't have to keep living the same stories just because that's how it's always been. But if you resist, if you cling to the lead, it will only pull you down. The sooner you understand this, the easier the transition will be. The gold you seek isn't out there. It has always been inside you. It was just buried beneath the weight you were taught to carry. Now only one question remains. Are you ready to let go? Saturn and cosmic justice. But letting go of the weight doesn't mean the journey becomes easy, because everything left behind still needs to be understood. The alchemical process isn't just about abandonment, it's about learning. And this is where Saturn comes in. The great master, the lord of time, the one who teaches through pain and discipline. The ancients knew you don't escape your own lessons. Saturn represents cosmic justice. In the celestial map, he rules over the cycles of life, the inevitable harvest of the seeds we plant, the return of everything we once sent out. He doesn't punish or reward, he simply balances. His influence in Nigredo is clear. Everything unresolved comes back. Every unconscious pattern resurfaces, demanding to be faced, and that's why Nigredo is so intense. Because here, you see with absolute clarity that nothing happening to you is random. Every pain, every hardship, every repeated struggle isn't punishment. It's a reflection of what still needs to be understood. Karma isn't a divine court handing out sentences. It's a patient teacher bringing back the same lessons until you finally learn. And the more you resist, the harsher those lessons become. In Hermetic texts, Poimandres, the spirit of wisdom, teaches that to reach true enlightenment, one must cross the portal of chaos. This portal separates those still trapped in illusion from those who have awakened to truth. But crossing it requires a sacrifice. The abandonment of the old identity, the false security of the ego, the attachment to what isn't real. And this is the hardest part, because the mind wants to cling to the story of who you were. The ego was built over years, shaped by your environment, by society's beliefs, by the fears you were taught to carry. It's like a mask you've worn for so long that you believe it's your real face, and now the mask has to fall. But the ego won't dissolve without a fight. It creates excuses, distortions, justifications. It makes you believe you still need that toxic relationship, and it makes you fear change. It makes you hold on to familiar pain instead of risking the unknown. That's why Nigredo is described as fire. Fire burns, consumes, destroys, but it also purifies. Alchemists understood that fire wasn't an enemy. It was a portal. It doesn't destroy what is true, only what was never real. The same thing happens within consciousness. The more you try to hold on to what needs to leave, the more intense the burning becomes. And when the ego begins to crumble, something terrifying happens. The old identity dissolves. What once made sense no longer does. What once felt safe now feels empty. Certainties vanish. It's a deep void, a kind of psychological death. But this death is necessary, because without it, the gold can never emerge. The journey through the dark night, awakening to the light. And then, everything falls apart. When Nigredo reaches its peak, there are no more illusions to hold on to. The ground disappears, and what once felt solid dissolves into emptiness. The mind desperately searches for something to hold on to, some kind of meaning. But there's nothing. It feels like an endless free fall, passing through layers of yourself you never even knew existed. This is the most critical moment. Hitting rock bottom isn't just a metaphor, it's real. Not in a physical sense, but in the internal experience of total collapse. The ego, shattered, tries to piece itself back together, but there are no more masks to sustain it. The past no longer exists. The future is uncertain. All that remains is the present, and within it, only darkness. And this is where many people give up. They look for quick escapes, try to rebuild old patterns, cling to anything that brings the slightest sense of familiarity. But this is the ultimate test. A true alchemist doesn't run. He stays. He faces the void without trying to fill it. Because he knows that only through the complete destruction of the false can the truth emerge. This is the journey through the dark night. And then, something shifts. In the exact moment when there's no more resistance, when the fear of loss dissolves, when acceptance replaces despair, light begins to appear. Not an explosive light, not an overwhelming revelation, just a subtle thread, a tiny spark of clarity in the midst of chaos, because Nigredo is not the end. It is the preparation for a new beginning, and this new beginning is called albedo. If Nigredo is symbolic death, albedo is rebirth. Consciousness now moves through a new portal. The weight has been left behind, and something new is starting to emerge. There is a different kind of silence within, a clarity that wasn't there before. It's not euphoric happiness, not a permanent state of enlightenment, just clarity. The gold hasn't appeared yet, but the journey continues, because alchemy isn't a single transformation, it's a cycle. With every death, there is a rebirth. With every darkness, a new light. There is no final destination, only an endless deepening. And now the choice stands before you. Move forward or stop here. Because those who choose to continue know that this journey isn't for everyone. But they also know that once the truth has been seen, there's no turning back. The call has been made. The portal is open. The decision is yours. Before you go, there's something really important waiting for you. I've prepared a special video to help you take the next step on this journey. A deep dive into everything we've talked about here, showing you how to apply it in your real life, so don't leave just yet. Click the video on your screen now, and I'll meet you there. See you on the other side.